As I'm sure you all know, we were just shocked and devastated to hear of the loss of Chadwick Boseman this past Friday, who, unbeknownst to the public at large, had been battling cancer for the last several years. As many have noted, he not only brought the character of Black Panther so vividly to life for the MCU, a character, a role, a movie that frankly changed the history of Hollywood forever. Changed the history of the way Hollywood even thinks of how movies can be made forever. But he also embodied some of our most iconic historical figures in Thurgood Marshall, James Brown, and Jackie Robinson. Chadwick's work was dynamic, engaging, captivating. It was somehow human and larger than life all at once. And his loss is deeply felt by his fans, this industry, the world at large. And of course, most importantly, our thoughts are with his friends and his family right now. Normally, we would spend our entire show talking about his legacy. But the timing was such that we had pre-taped this show, as some of our team took some much-needed time off. So please know that we will continue to talk about him and his legacy when we return to our live shows next week. But for now, our very sincerest condolences go out to Chadwick Boseman's family, his friends, and you, us, his fans.
Hey guys, welcome to SJU. I'm your host, Joe Starr. I've got with me Mr. Eric Goldman. Hello, sir.
Hello there. Hello.
And Mr. Lon Harris, accompanied by Taco.
He's right there. There he is.
Hey, I love it.
Hey,
Well, hey guys, so
animal friends.
every now and then we like to try to be useful with this show. Will it be successful? I don't know. But what we wanted to get into today was we want to start taking a look at all the streaming services, especially some of like the niche, like really like boutique stuff, and take you through it with two people who really know the lay of the land, so you can get a good idea of whether or not it's if it's worth your time and money or not. And we're starting today with Shudder, the streaming service of Shudder. You two, big horror fans. Big, just experts ins and outs of the genre. I know you guys both use this service. So I wanted to just sort of chat with you guys about sort of like what, I don't know, like a beginner's 101 guide to Shudder.
Shudder is, I guess, first and foremost, is owned by AMC Networks. So it's a sister station to AMC, the cable channel. But yeah, it's been around for like 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of catalog titles, but they're also doing their own original stuff. So You will see some. I feel like if people know them for a series, it's probably Creepshow right now, which actually got a second run on AMC a few months ago. But they also have a lot of exclusive things, a lot of movies that you may or may not have heard about, or you heard, oh, that's a cool movie, but you haven't seen it yet. Shudder is kind of starting to get more and more exclusives on things that got pretty minimal distribution, which I think is...
That's actually what inspired me to do this one, because like as I scroll through Amazon, I see tons of titles and I'm like, hey, and every time, 8 times out of 10, like when I click on them, they're like, start your Shudder subscription to watch this for free. So it's $5.99 a month, or I believe you can get an annual price that's a little bit down, and they're currently offering a 7-day trial. So with that 7-day trial in mind, because we're all very poor, I just kind of want to jump in with you guys. Like, what is the 101 like primer guide to what people should be checking out on Shudder if they do like a 7-day trial? And I think let's start with like their original stuff, like you sort of brought up, Eric. What is the original stuff to Shudder that's going to make people stick around?
Well, there's some Tokyo drifting happening. Find someone.
Oh yeah. I live in a very dangerous area.
I'm curious, Lon, if you've seen, because I don't want to talk too much about this movie because I've already talked about it. But I think the one that's getting a lot of buzz right now is Host.
Yes,
right?
I figured this was coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Host is, I think, is putting Shudder on the map a little more this summer because it's been one of the more talked about during the pandemic project. Spencer and I actually did kind of a full review of it. Have you seen it yet, Lon?
Yes, I've checked it out. I mean, I think what's so interesting about it is it's an idea that was so out there in the world. Like, of course, people are going to make like a quarantine movie where everybody's on Zoom just like we are now. And like all of the sort of raw materials were so like in the air already. And yet they nailed it. Like they did such a good job, even though we all kind of knew this movie was coming, that I think that's given it a lot of like novelty. Like that's it's the level of difficulty of doing that, of like taking an idea that the world already had and like improving on what everybody thought you were going to do with it is like, that alone is just, I think, really impressive.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this when I reviewed it with Spencer, but it was very easy to imagine a bad version of this.
Right.
But this
and I mean, there have been some like on YouTube, like a lot of people sort of tried to do this kind of thing.
I'll make a creepy movie at home, but this was very skillfully done by the director, Rob Savage. The acting is great, like very good acting. And yeah, it's really impressive. And I think right now, I think if you're that's going to be the thing I think that a lot of people are right now already using their 7-day free trial for.
Sure.
But I think it is a good one to jump into. It's only an hour long, by the way, too. So you have plenty more time on those 7 days.
Well, see, this is why I like videos like this, because like I'm a fan of the genre and I love, my classic Carpenters and stuff like that. But I'm also like very much a tourist and very much like a Padawan. And I love, one of my favorite things about working for this company is moments like this where I just get to like kind of just shut up and listen and go, and just, so, like you said, it's an hour long. Once everyone's done with that hour, they have, I don't know how math works, but they have 6 days and some pocket change left.
Sure.
It's 6 days and plus 23 hours.
Plus 20 hours,
The calculation. I mean, if they're not sleeping.
Yeah.
Well, who's sleeping today? Yeah.
Which who can anymore? So, where should people head after Host?
A couple of my other favorites is, and this is a thing where I kind of, original or exclusive. Like I said, it's like there's a movie called Tigers Are Not Afraid. There was a Mexican film made in 2017, but it got minimal distribution here in America, and Shudder is kind of the exclusive streaming home for it. That is a really great movie. The writer-director, Issa Lopez, she's gotten a ton of acclaim for it. She's working with Guillermo del Toro now. Noah Hawley is producing a project she's doing.
Yeah.
And that's a movie that's, it's a very sort of like almost fantasy meets horror. How would you describe that one, Lon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense that she would connect with Guillermo del Toro, because it is sort of in that, like, a lot of these kind of Mexican films where they bring together that magical realism side with ghost stories or horror, like legitimate horror. Like The Devil's Backbone is a del Toro one. Spirit of the Beehive, also like a memorable sort of classic example. And
Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth, exactly. And I think this fits like so neatly in that tradition while also giving it a new and very modern and like very weird, like surreal kind of spin. And so, yeah, I mean, as soon as you heard that she was working with Guillermo del Toro, it's like, oh, of course, that's a match made in heaven.
Yeah. And I really dig a movie on there called Mayhem. Ready or Not was one of my favorite movies last year, and Samara Weaving quickly became a favorite of mine from that. If you want to see another movie where rich people regret taking on Samara Weaving and trapping her in place, you should watch Mayhem, which is her and Stephen Yeun. It's a little bit of a zombie movie because people are infected and it makes them act out and violent or sexual or just kind of act without any limitations. But it's also them trapped in this corporate building trying to get up to the top, to the rich people at the top, and causing mayhem. Hey, it's not just a clever title along the way. That is really, and again, I should say it got like a DVD release, but I think most people haven't seen Mayhem, and if they want to check it out, Shudder would be the place to do so.
Sure. There's a great one, sort of speaking of Latin American films, and it's, I want to bring it up because a lot of people are getting it confused. There was The Curse of La Llorona, which is like a Conjuring universe movie with Linda Cardellini that came out in the US, last year, 2 years ago. There's also a movie called La Llorona that is set in Guatemala against this sort of political uprising. And it takes kind of this, a very different tack with the same folklore and kind of ties it in with, rather than just being like kidnapped children, it's like kind of the treatment of indigenous peoples and their kind of like ultimate sort of revenge or comeuppance of the colonizers. And it's really cool and really well done and like very layered, like a horror movie, but also kind of a political thriller. And that's very cool. And like the kind of thing that on a curated service like Shudder, you can sort of rely on them. Like if it's something that's weird that you might not have heard of, you could watch it because Shudder's doing such a great job of finding these kinds of movies from around the world. Yeah. So it's like a curated kind of branded platform that I think is trustworthy to experiment on interesting stuff like this.
Yeah. I know another one that they're distributing is we don't have to jump too deeply into it because I know we haven't, especially me, I've been guilty. I haven't shut up about this in like a year. But Mandy's on there.
Yes.
Which, if you haven't seen it yet,
oh man,
Nicolas Cage, an axe.
I mean, yeah, like Mandy is one of those movies, and like not a lot of movies really do this, where it's like it's entirely set in like an alternate world. Like there are pop culture references, but none of them are to real things that exist, and they're like location names, but none of them are exactly like real places. It's like a complete fantasy horror dark universe, and that's like so cool and immersive. I really love that about the film.
It's got one of my favorite sort of movie tropes in it where they're not going to explain a thing to you, and a man saying, there's a legend about demon bikers in these woods is enough. And I love that I love things like that. That movie absolutely speaks my language.
And then one I really wanted to mention, because there's a few really cool documentaries on there, but I think a really standout original one that they produced, Shudder, is called Horror Noir. And it's a look at sort of the history of black horror films. And it taught me a lot about some early stuff that I didn't know about, and filmmakers I didn't know about. It also has great stuff like, Ken Faree from Dawn of the Dead sitting and chatting with Keith David in a movie theater and just sharing stories, and lots of great interviews throughout. And that's a really cool documentary.
Yeah, it's one of those cool movies. It's about, it's got a story and a narrative, but it's also just a chronicle of like all of these historical films that you might not have seen. So you leave it with tons of ideas for stuff you want to watch and connections you hadn't made before. Like a really exciting movie that'll get you excited to watch other horror.
I think a lot of people probably know that there was a movie called Blackula, but getting a little context around Blackula and what it meant,
Right. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's sort of just like a touch and go, like cultural reference where you kind of go, like Blackula. Right. But yeah, I mean, just around that era, there's so many just cool, like interesting stories and cool work that was being done.
Mm-hmm. That hasn't traditionally been sort of celebrated. I mean, I kind of almost in the same way, I don't want to directly compare because a lot of these are great movies that were very professionally made, but kind of in the same way that Dolomite last year, like that Netflix movie kind of highlighted this totally not known about from the mainstream world sort of pocket of exciting, interesting cinema. I think this documentary sort of shines a whole bunch of lights into these sort of, communities that weren't being featured by the movie magazines or the press of the day, and so people just didn't know about it.
Yeah. That's all really, really cool stuff. Thank you guys, actually, very much. Like, I'm also keeping a running list, like, sort of as you guys talk about this stuff. We'll skip shows for a second. We'll come back to shows, because you can't have a streaming service without, like, a pretty solid list of licensed movies. Sure. What are sort of Shudder's heavyweights for that kind of thing? If you sort of want that comfort and that nostalgia.
Yeah, this is where, we should say, it's like, this is where stuff does come and go. Look, we're seeing this where people are like, why is Jurassic Park leaving Peacock? And why is Harry Potter leaving HBO Max? Yeah. Streaming deals are complicated, and a lot of the big titles come and go. So, like, right now, I'm a little disingenuous with my guys behind me because there's no Freddy or Jason movies. There's some documentaries we can talk about. They've been there in the past, and I bet they'll
You didn't
pop
have
up
a Nick
again.
Cage from Mandy action figure.
Right. So, like, there isn't right now any Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th movies. They do have the original Halloween right now. They have Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think when you talk about sort of the perennials, those two are certainly there at the moment. Night of the Living Dead is public domain, so it's not that hard to get.
It's everywhere.
So they have it. And then it's just
Phantasm. We were talking about that.
Yep, they have the restoration,
a storied horror classic, right? And they have the new version.
Hellraiser is there. Has his Hellraiser 2. By the way, if you dive deep on this, a lot of times it's the strangeness of these horror franchises that kept switching distributors. So they have Hellraiser 1 and 2 because those were kind of packaged together, and they've got Halloween 1, 4, and 5 because those are also the same distributor. Whereas like 2 and 3 are Universal. It's like all these franchises. But I mean, Halloween is of course such a classic. And guess what, guys? We're going into Halloween season. So there, you can see the original.
It's soon. It is. I can smell the pumpkin spice.
Oh, and I should mention. Sorry, go on, and then I'll.
No, I was going to say there's also a lot of like sort of a little more like indie or oddball kind of titles that are nonetheless sort of like canonical for big horror fans at the moment. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Annalily Amirpour's debut, which is this really cool black and white sort of low-key teenage vampire story. And then House of the Devil with Greta Gerwig, which was a really influential sort of movie in its day. Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer with Michael Rooker's on there. The Maniac Cop trilogy, William Lustig, sort of
some Bruce
ridiculous
Campbell.
80s, 90s slasher movies with Bruce Campbell.
And then I feel like on the exact opposite of that classy coin is the Ginger Snaps franchise.
Yes.
Or is it just the first Ginger Snaps? Or is it the complete...
Right now they only have Ginger Snaps 1.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think two is actually kind of hard to track down because there was a How Did This Get Made about it that I wanted to listen to, and it's a little hard to find too.
Yeah. So they only have 1, but they do have Sleepaway Camp 1 through 3. And
Yes.
Sleepaway Camp is a movie I demand everyone watch. Don't ever look up anything about it. Just watch it.
Right. Crucial that you not know what's coming in Sleepaway Camp.
Sleepaway
One of the most insane twist endings of all time.
An insane movie start to finish, I'd say. And then, yes, a lot happens in that movie. They have the sequels too, which are goofy, fun, a little different as far as how they approach them.
They kind of keep trying to come up with something that's going to equal the first movie. And how do you?
Which you can't, yeah. But then Shudder's also great to check out movies that I've always heard about but never seen. Our own Roth Cornet has always told me I should see Slumber Party Massacre 2. And a few months ago, I finally watched it thanks to Shudder and saw why she enjoys it so much. And the same with Prom Night 1 and 2. I've never seen Prom Night 2 is a lot better than Prom Night 1. And then there's just some fun kind of cult stuff on there. There is a movie called Bloody Birthday that I had not ever heard about. That's what Shudder's really fun. If you're a horror fan, if you're home late at night, you're like, let's check out Bloody Birthday. I think it's from 1981. It's about 3 kids born on the same night. It's like an eclipse or something happened, and on their 11th birthday, they start killing people. And it's a very enjoyable lark of a film. And then I do think, by the way, Heathers is a little strange on Shudder. Heathers isn't a horror movie, but it's one of my favorite movies, so it's there.
I think there's if you want to see all 3 Sleepaway Camps, I feel like that Venn diagram is pretty strong. That you'll also probably watch Heathers on a whim.
I think that's what I was trying to say. Like Shudder's one of those services where it's not like Netflix or Amazon Prime, where it's just like they're just throwing tons of stuff at you at the wall, and it's like you're gonna like some of this stuff, even if you don't like all of it. Shudder's really like, if you are the kind of person that likes movies, these kinds of movies, you're going to like most of what's on Shudder, and you can just sort of pick and choose what looks interesting to you. And I've discovered a lot. It's like The Void is a movie I discovered on Shudder that I love, which is like this weird Lovecraftian, very like gross practical effects indie from 2016.
Yeah, and that's again why sort of I'll ask you guys for some misses, so this doesn't sound completely like a shill job. But more and more, anytime I spot something scrolling, particularly if I'm like on Amazon and catching stuff, because you can attach the service to Amazon like you can with HBO. Stuff like The Headhunter, that weird sort of fantasy man versus monster in the woods, just stuff like that always catches my eye, and it always tends to be on this service. But that said, since this is not brought to you by Shudder,
it's not,
and right now we're loving it harder than we usually love all things Marvel, which we've never critiqued negatively at all in the history of this channel.
They pay so well.
God, the money is just...
Those Disney dollars. Am I right, boys?
Oh, yeah.
Look at all this.
What are some, if someone's got, 7 days, and again, I don't know how days work, but, they've got 6 hours left. Time is precious. What's some stuff you can probably skip?
There's an Austrian movie called Party Hard, Die Young that I had read some positive reviews, and it kind of looked like Hostel. It's like they go to like Croatia for like crazy teen vacation or whatever.
Sounds like an Andrew WK album.
But would have made a better Andrew WK album than film. Wasn't a huge fan of that one. Just generic and sort of like not very interesting and like kind of what you expect going in. I would definitely skip that one. I don't know, Eric, you want to go?
It's funny because when you ask this, Joe, I'm like, there's definitely, I mentioned Bloody Birthday as definitely one of the more successful. I'm going to watch a random movie I've never heard of on Shudder. There's been a couple others where it was kind of a dud or boring, but I'm blanking on what they were. because the boring ones kind of wash over you, you know? I will say, Three from Hell, which is like the third in Rob Zombie's trilogy that House of a Thousand Corpses started.
Oh, right.
My personal feeling is House of a Thousand Corpses, but I really like Devil's Rejects. It's like easily my favorite movie he directed. Three from Hell it did not do it for me. And then they have some really good documentaries on there, but one I thought could have been something, I don't know, more, and wasn't an original of theirs, but it was, again, this is where you can see it easily, is called In Search of Darkness, and it's definitely fun. It's a long documentary about 80s horror movies, and it kind of goes over every big 80s horror movies, but I did think they could have gone deeper. It's kind of because they're covering too much. You almost feel like, you got to focus, guys. Yeah. Like, you're name dropping so many and giving like 5 minutes to all these great movies, but because you're trying to cover so much, it felt kind of like, you're not really getting below the surface here. You're just going over movies we like.
Okay.
There were some series. If we're transitioning into series, there have been a few original series that I found kind of disappointing. There's one called True Horror, where it's like it's like a reality thing where they're going to like recreate people, like talk about their paranormal experiences and then like shoot reenactments, and it's pretty cheesy. It reminds me of like one of those basic cable shows where it's like ghost hospital, or whatever. And it's like, and actually, we're gonna come back around to Creep Show. It wasn't a total loss, but I don't think most of those segments were up to the level of quality of the movies, and that's kind of surprising considering the talent, the caliber of talent. But like, you think with Greg Nicotero kind of running the show, I expected, I think, a little more out of it.
Yeah, a Creep Show I think is worth checking out. It's an anthology. Sure. There's 2 stories per episode. But I agree with you, Lon, that given everyone behind it and some of the actors they get, you'd think like it would be more consistent because there's a couple of really standout stories.
Right.
But I think that you kind of wish it would ratio a little more to like, it's 70% great, where I think it's
and I mean, especially the first movie, like the movies don't have the greatest reputation, but I think the first Creep Show movie is really solid. Like every segment has stuff that works in the first movie, and I don't know if 2, I don't think lived up to that, and I don't think the show quite lives up even to 2 in terms of consistency. And it's disappointing because it's a cool franchise.
Yeah.
Any series worth sort of visiting?
They've got a few that were AMC originals that, again, because of their relationship are on there. So History of Horror, The Story of Science Fiction, Secret History of Comics are all sort of fun. History of Horror was the one Eli Roth did. Story of Science Fiction is the one Cameron did, and Secret History of Comics is Kirkman. In all cases, they got like a lot of very impressive people to do these sit-down interviews. The Story of Science Fiction is like Cameron sitting down with like Lucas and all these like luminaries and just
it's pretty crazy.
It's definitely impressive.
Right on.
Also, a docuseries called Cursed Films that is really great. It's like all the stories of movies like Twilight Zone the movie or Poltergeist or The Omen, where there were like tragedies behind the scenes and like there's these sort of urban legends of an actual curse behind the horror movie. So that one is like, if you are a movie history kind of buff, it's like a fascinating deep dive on that. I really enjoyed that one.
I really like Cursed Films too. There's a couple episodes I thought were a little more but then there's some very strong ones and so there's some pretty emotional stuff on it.
Sure. It's very like dark and it's not like just making hay out of it or like a goof. It's like really taking these stories seriously, almost like true crime in some cases.
And then I think there's The Last Drive-In is just kind of fun as far as like something to have on a Friday night. Last Drive-In is Joe Bob Briggs, who's been around forever, introduced a lot of, if you're an 80s kid, he might have introduced you to a lot of like fun horror movies. Sure. And now he's doing the same thing. They're showing the movies with these breaks for Joe Bob to be there and kind of give his commentary on. Sometimes it's movies that they don't regularly have on Shudder. That's kind of a special presentation of them. And that there's still some really fun stuff on that.
Well, that's cool. So let me sort of get your all's thoughts on this. We'll sort of go out on this conversation, I guess. Shudder seems to kind of be like, kind of the leading like niche streaming service. To me, it's like Shudder and then Crunchyroll, which is probably getting sold, and then like the Funimation app, which is less of a streaming service and more just that company's app for
maybe I'd say Criterion, but that's obviously a very different thing. How do you guys sort of see like the niche service like going?
as the streaming wars progress? Are they going to get absorbed? Do they survive?
I think it's interesting because we're in a time now where I think, contrary to where a lot of people thought it was going to go, I think a lot of people thought there was going to be kind of this a la carte system, like I'm going to get HBO Max and Netflix and Amazon, and that'll be my streaming services.
Right.
But instead, people are really gravitating to like Roku channels and services like Tubi, and even Peacock has this where it's like there's the Peacock VOD service, but then there's also just these streaming random channels and stuff. So we're getting into more of a diversified sort of marketplace than I think we thought. And I think there are enough platforms now that there is room for stuff like Crunchyroll and Shudder to bring kind of the specialized service, because they can sell it. Like, you don't have to go to Shudder.com. You can get it through Amazon Prime.
Right.
You can get it through Apple TV. So, like, I think there's a more so than maybe a few years ago, there does seem to now be almost like a way forward if these services can really stand out and I think nail the curation, which is what Shudder is doing and Crunchyroll is doing, where it's not just here's where you go for horror, because there's horror on every service. It's here's where you go for this curated library that you can rely on, like everything or most things are like pretty good. Somebody's paying attention and putting good stuff on there.
Yeah.
And like month to month, you can count on there's going to be one or two interesting new things to check out.
Yeah. If Netflix is like Tower Records, then Shudder is Rob Gordon from High Fidelity's record store.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like some people are just going to naturally gravitate to that. They don't want all the options in the world. They want, give me 3 things, but make them like awesome and exactly what I want.
And I think Shudder also has helped a lot by the fact that, you know, the horror audience, obviously considering myself one of them, we want to be entertained, but we're also like, we can be entertained by something wonderful and great and something that is bad as long as it's entertaining.
Yeah.
A couple things I did want to mention, Tammy and the T-Rex before we go, as far as like a so good, bad it's good, which is, the mind of Paul Walker put inside a robotic dinosaur, and Denise Richards has his girlfriend, and then the dinosaur starts killing people. It's amazing. It's not great, but it's amazing. So it's like the horror audience, I think, is an intensely loyal one. So Shudder has that step up that other of the smaller ones, more focused ones, can struggle with a little bit. And then I also wanted to mention in passing, just before we go, that the documentaries, like I said, they don't have Elm Street or Friday the 13th, but they've got these like 4 or 5 hour documentaries about them. Crystal Lake Memories, which is like a deep dive on every one of the Friday the 13th movies. And it's like 5 hours total. But if you're me, you're going to watch that. You don't have to watch it all at once. They have one called Never Sleep Again about the Elm Street series that's sort of similar. This is stuff that horror fans are, I think love that immersive stuff. And also, by the way, guys, always want to remind you, you don't have to commit to, you can do it a few months at a time. You can cancel it and then you can get it again a few months later when you start seeing new stuff pop up that you want.
Create a new email address, get that new segment.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of anything like that.
Lon, you got any closing thoughts, man?
I think the cool thing about a service like Shudder is, that you can take a risk. Like in Netflix, it's like, who knows, maybe you'll stumble into The Floor is Lava and be delighted and entertained, but maybe you'll stumble into The Island and you're screwed. And I think Shudder is like, you can just like watch it. And every once in a while it'll be like that Austrian movie I didn't particularly care for, but every once in a while it'll be like The Wailing from South Korea, and it's incredible and it blows your mind. And like, I think that's the cool thing about these kinds of services specifically. And I think that's what I enjoy doing in Shudder the most. It's just like spin the wheel and like, where do I end up and what's this thing? I'm going to check it out.
Yep.
Well, thanks. I think we kind of nailed this as well as 3 white guys in black t-shirts can nail it.
Which is a lot. Which is by a lot.
Right. Killing it. Yeah.
If history has shown anything. Let us know what your favorite horror movies are in the comments. Recommend stuff people should check out in the comments. My favorite interactions in here are less, I can't believe you left out blank, and more just like, hey, have you ever heard of blank? I'm really excited about it. I want you to be excited about it too. So give us that energy there in the comments section. I always love just like sitting and listening to you guys just talk about just stuff I ain't as good at. I honestly mean that. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and talking Shudder with me a little bit. We've had it on the books for a little while. Glad we could finally do it. I don't know what day this is because this is a pre-tape, and I don't actually listen to Ryan ever. But I hope you enjoy your tomorrow, and we'll see you at some point soon. Bye, guys.